Hello, and welcome to Cali Formula 1. My name is Jojo Joseph, coming to you from San Diego, California. Today we are going to recap the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix. It's going to be a two-sided conversation. We're going to talk about the race and how amazing and dramatic it was, and how it was everything that we wanted Formula 1 to be. But we're also going to talk about the bad side of it, the location, the circumstances, including a military strike that happened during free practice and before, the conditions of the human rights in the country, and sponsorships and money that flows into Formula One. I think that's a pretty valid conversation to talk about. So it's going to be a little bit of a weird episode because we are going to talk first about racing. I think that's important to talk about the actual race. That's why we're here. And we're going to recap everything like we usually do and go through, who did great and who didn't, and, what we loved and what we didn't like. But we're also going to spend a little bit of time talking on the back end of things, as far as why we're in Saudi Arabia, why we're in other countries, how much we should really care about the sponsorships that get tied to Formula One, and that really can affect really the business more so than many other sports and corporate partnerships. I think it's a very valid conversation. So that's going to be on the second half of the episode. So I encourage you to stick around for that. Obviously I want to get your feedback as well. So I'm going to encourage you to reach out. We do have a lot of new subscribers coming in. We've today hit 1,800 downloads, which is pretty insane. We're at 67 countries, which is pretty insane. This is the 1 year anniversary, so happy anniversary to Cali Formula 1. When I started this off a year ago, I didn't expect these numbers. I didn't expect to reach out and network and talk to and develop a community with so many wonderful F1 fans. It's been truly, truly amazing. I watched Formula One here since 2012 here in the United States of America, here in California. And there was times where I'm like, does anyone actually watch this sport? Am I the only one? Am I, that one guy wandering the desert, screaming about how wonderful this amazing sport is? And now there's this amazing community. I've met so many wonderful people. Today, I actually got to go watch the race with a Formula One friend. Thank you, Sarah, for your wonderful hospitality, and thank you to your husband Ryan and your two wonderful dogs for letting me watch the race with you. It was a lot of fun, and hopefully we'll get to do more watch parties together. But this is what I love. It's the fact that doing this podcast and being active has opened up the whole new community, and that's what we really love about this. But it's also been able to show, meet people around the world and get different opinions, to learn about different cultures and how people see things. I know for me, being an American sports fan and dealing with a lot of people who are Formula One fans on the other side of the world, we see things a lot different. We definitely do. We take things differently. We interpret things differently. We look at how, we take comments from drivers and read them completely different ways and everything. And I think that's pretty amazing because you get to talk through it and everything. And, relative to coming back here to Saudi Arabia, there's definitely a lot of opinions. And you're going to have different opinions than me. Let's get that out there. I'm not going to tell you what you think. But I am going to speak my mind. But I encourage you to reach out to me. So, on the website, CaliFormula1.com, you're going to be able to go to the description of the podcast or the YouTube channel and leave comments. Or you could just email me. If you go to the website, CaliFormula1, there's a contact me. So definitely send your thoughts because I definitely want to hear it. Whether it's about the race or the political things that we're going to talk about later on. But getting back to the race, Max Verstappen came back with a vengeance. I guess you could say Red Bull strikes back after a disastrous opening race in Bahrain where both drivers had mechanical issues late in the race that cost them all points. They ended up with 0 points. They were able to storm back. Sergio Perez getting a pole lap, the first Mexican driver to get a pole lap. He had a little bit of bad luck in the race. Max Verstappen had a terrible qualifying, but was able to have a tremendous race, moving up 3 spots, battling out with Charles LeClerc. We had a tremendous battle between the two, but Max Verstappen came out on top, winning the race, taking his first win of the year, probably the first of a few this year. We'll see how things go, but he has to be feeling on cloud 9. Definitely a winner today. We're going to do winners and losers. I'm just doing this on the fly. We're going to assign winners and losers as we walk through everyone, but definitely a win for him, not just on the track. This was a great drive for him. In the last race in Bahrain, when he was challenging Charles, Charles kind of played him like a banjo. He kind of baited him, kind of forced him to make some moves. And you started to see that today. You saw a couple times where Charles would force him wide and force him to go deep, try to, on the restarts, try to sit there and try to get him to overcommit and blow by him. But at the end there, Max showed patience. And this is something that he's struggled with. He has struggled with being patient, trying to get by people or trying to get close to people and everything. It's actually been a disadvantage to him because he ends up doing something rash, driving aggressive or something like that. Today, he definitely got baited a couple times. There's no doubt about it. As great as a racer as he is, he does have to work on that wheel-to-wheel racecraft where he has to learn that he just can't attack all the time. Sometimes you do have to sit back. But today you did see that a little bit where he kind of sort of got aggressive, but he didn't get aggressive enough. And he forced Leclerc to make a mistake. He took the lead and was able to, put foot on the pedal and keep at it. And here's what's really cool about this. One of the times that Charles did bait him out, he ended up locking up his wheels, but because he was doing such a good job, holding back when he needed to, managing the tires, keeping pace up there, but not overcommitting, once he got past, he was able to put pedal to the metal and keep that gap just enough. It was a very close race at the end. So Max Verstappen, I'm going to put him in the winner category. Definitely a phenomenal race from him. This is what they should have had last year, but it's a long season. He's got more ahead of him. So, I'm really, really happy for him. I'm happy for the Red Bull team because they were able to bounce back so much. You don't want to see stuff like that where you have drivers just completely, losing it and, for no fault of their own with mechanical issues, and to see the whole team have it. It's just not good for the sport, just to see that happen consistently. So for them to come back in the way they did, I'm just going to put him in the win category, both Max and Red Bull. His counterpart, Sergio Perez, I want to give Sergio a win so bad and put him in the winners category. And by the way, I need to refresh something. When I say winners and losers, I'm not actually calling the person a loser. I just want to make that clear because sometimes people will be like, wait a minute, hold on a second. No. Like, just for this particular weekend, just based off what happened. And sometimes it's their fault of their own and sometimes it's no fault of their own. For Sergio, it stinks because I have to put him in the loser category through no fault of his own. He had a pole lap. If you go to the YouTube video and watch that pole lap, it was phenomenal. It's amazing. The things that people were talking about Max in Saudi Arabia last year with that pole lap that never was, that's what Sergio did this year. It was his first ever pole, first Mexican driver to get a pole. And this is something that I've criticized him for, especially last year, where last year he would qualify terribly, but have tremendous race pace, and you'd see him make all these great moves to kind of get back up into things. This year, he qualified really, really well. He qualified on pole, and that's pretty amazing for him, and that's a good sign for him. But he also had terrible luck. I mean, and it just stinks for him because, the reason I'm putting him in the loser category is he had pole position. He was running a great race. He got caught out with a safety car at the wrong possible time. I know that's not his fault, but to not end up even with a podium, that's got to be pretty rough. And for a little bit there, he had fastest lap too, and that got snatched away. So that's just got to be tough to be able to start off in pole position and, have a competitive car and be driving a great race, but just not to end up with anything. That's why I'm dropping him down into the loser category. And I hate to do that because everything was great about it, but just to not come out with anything, that's got to be pretty rough. And it's really the only damper on Red Bull's weekend is the fact that, fourth place should be happy for him. But with Sergio, I'm going to be putting him in the winners category quite a bit the rest of the year just because he's going to do phenomenal. But as a team with Red Bull, they have to be pretty happy right now. They're back in the thick of things. The reliability issues that plagued them last race, they were able to get fixed within a week. From the top Red Bull team, we didn't seem to see any issues whatsoever. And that's a good thing. So they're in a good spot. So, I think that they're going to be pretty happy moving forward. Who else has to be pretty happy moving forward? Ferrari. Both drivers, phenomenal. They started off second and third in the race. They finished second and third. Charles had a great race. Carlos had a great race too. They both took advantage of the safety car. Charles was in the lead there for a really good time. He did make that slight mistake, but honestly, you could sit there and talk about both cars drive well, but they both have great drivers in them. So Ferrari has done a great job getting in those two great drivers, getting in them long-term, committing to them, and then giving them a great car to drive. They both look phenomenal out there. They're just cool, calm, and collected. You don't see them cracking under pressure that much. Charles did have a little bit at the end. But overall, though, they both seem to be doing really well. For Charles, I mean, we've seen flashes of this before, like 2019. Obviously, 20 and 21, they struggled because they had terrible cars. But you are seeing flashes. You saw flashes earlier, but now you're just seeing it come full circle. People have been arguing for a while who's the better driver, Max or Charles. This is the year where we're going to actually get to see who's the better driver. With Charles, it did kind of stink because things got a little bit stagnant with Ferrari, with the car, whereas Red Bull really got aggressive about development and was able to challenge Mercedes. So we got to see Max in a great car challenging a great driver. And now with Charles, we get to see Charles in a great car challenging a great driver, which is Max Verstappen. And it looks like he really has developed into that next level. And when I mean that next level, is he a championship driver? I think he's a championship caliber driver. I think there's no doubt about it. I think in the 2 races, not to overreact or anything, but he looks like he could compete with just about anyone. And right now his battles have been with Max, but if Mercedes gets up to speed, I think he'll be able to put his compete just fine with them. He looks to be handling his teammate pretty well, and he's definitely handled Sergio pretty well as well. So, I mean, we're seeing a change here from Charles Leclerc being what can he be to what he's becoming. And I think that's really cool to see. And it's cool to see it happen in real time because both of these drivers, both Max and Charles, they're the future of the sport. And we've known this for a while, but we're finally getting to see it. For Carlos, I'm giving him a win, and I'm putting him in the win category just because he is consistently doing a great job. I think Carlos, though, has to be feeling a little bit bugged out because he has a great car, but he's one of those people that wants to get more. He hasn't had his first win yet. He's in a phenomenal car, and he's looking for that payoff. Part of me thinks that he's really worried that he's going to be relegated to a B driver relatively fast. Now granted, de facto he is the B driver. Charles is the poster boy for Ferrari, but I think Carlos, after last year saying, "Man, I'm just as consistently good as him. I'm going to be as competitive as him." But I think right now he's thinking to himself, "Man, I really need to get some wins. I need to get some poles. I need to get up there, and I need to get ahead of him so people could, maybe pay attention to me." Because at some point, it's going to happen. If Charles is in the title fight and Carlos is slipping a little bit behind, they're just going to put all the resources behind Charles, and Carlos is literally going to be there for blocking and, undercuts and all that other stuff, which I don't think he wants to be a Ferrari for that. He wants to be a Ferrari to win. But it's also kind of weird because he's had such a great year so far, 2 races in, but he's just driving really well. He's not making mistakes. He's getting a lot out of the car. He had, just doing the right things, being in the right areas, just making sure, even when Sergio had that unfortunate incident with the pit stop being bad timing, but even coming out, Carlos was just in the right spot, right time. He was able to make sure he was not slacking off and everything. And you got to really feel for him. I think that he's going to be really good, and I'm excited to see him. So wins for Ferrari all around. Carlos getting a podium, I think that's been really good for him. That's good booster for him because it shows that he's staying up top with his teammate. So that's really good for him. Moving on to Mercedes. This one's a tough one because I think it's official. I just have to say Mercedes is a midfield car for now. For now is an important part because, will things change when we get back to Europe? I think they will. Are they going to make changes when they get back to Europe? I think they will. Are they going to get much better and start competing? I definitely think they will. The question is, how well are those changes going to happen? And is it going to push them up to the top? Right now, there's a definitive gap between Red Bull, Ferrari, and Mercedes. There's no doubt about that. But it also seems like even Mercedes at its best is still not being able to touch both the Red Bull and the Ferraris, and that's concerning. It's concerning for several reasons. First and foremost is that it also leads to think that maybe the engine just isn't very good. So, they may do changes with downforce and an aero and all this other stuff, but is the engine ultimately just not fast enough to compete with that Red Bull engine or with that Ferrari engine? That's a big concern. And when you look at some of the other Mercedes customers, like the Williams, like the McLarens, like the Aston Martins, they're at the bottom of the grid. And so you have to sit there and say, like, man, even if they make all these changes, and they do all these upgrades and change the arrows and all the other stuff, by the time they get to Europe, is that still just going to make sure that they're still going to finish 5th and 6th? That's going to be the $1 million question. Or are they going to sit there and say, no, you know what, we're able to go ahead and compete and get victories and get back up there? So as far as the loser side, we are going to put the Mercedes team as a loser. But for the drivers, it's going to be interesting because for George Russell, I'm going to give him a win. This is going to be an absolute win for him. He outqualified his teammate. Granted, there was a reason behind that, which we'll get to in a second. He moved up one spot, so he qualified 6th, ended up 5th. Drove a really great race. For the car that he had, again, it's not going to compete, with the others, but to be able to still separate himself from everyone else. He had a good, clean race, nothing crazy going on. But it wasn't like he was scrapping and other people were catching up to him. He was able to separate from the rest of the pack. That's a good sign for Mercedes. The fact that you may not be able to catch up with the Red Bulls and Ferraris, but no one else is catching up with you. And that's great, and that's why I'm putting him in the winner category. But that being said, the car right now is a definite midfield car. His teammate, Lewis Hamilton, one of the shocking things I've seen in a very long time. Lewis came out of qualifying and didn't make it out of Q1. Barely didn't make it out of Q1, but still, I've watched Lewis since 2012. I've never seen this. I don't think any of us have ever seen anything quite as crazy, because this was a performance issue. This wasn't, the car broke down. This wasn't, driving in rain or something like that. This was straight up, they tried to do something different with the car. And I think, it was Lewis who said, let's try these things on the car. The car was junk in qualifying, and he ended up starting 15th, but after some changes ended up 14th. But to be able to move 5 spots up is pretty tremendous. Now, he did have a bit of bad luck, which was with the safety car, where there was a safety car, and instead of pitting, he was kept out. Whether that was bad luck or a strategy call, I'm sure we'll learn that tomorrow on just how close they were to bringing him in, or if they should have brought him in sooner. Who knows? But unfortunately for Lewis, I got to put him in the loser category just because it was his setup. It wasn't the team setup. It was his setup. He said he wanted to do it, to try things out, and that backfired, and that cost the team. And now he did run a really great race. When you actually watch what he did on the racetrack, that was pretty awesome too. But if I'm going to be knocking Sergio for having bad luck because, quite frankly, he wasn't able to maximize, I got to do the same thing with Lewis. And I know some of you are super fans for Lewis, so I apologize. Don't write angry letters or send me hate mail on Twitter or anything like that. But the fact of the matter is, he is a 7-time world champion. When it comes to setting up the car, when it comes to getting the most out of that, he did not. He was able to get the most out on race day, but ultimately the changes that he made, the gambles that he did end up costing not just himself, but the team as well. Now, they're still in a good spot because of Bahrain and what happened to Red Bull. But that being said, with Lewis, he's not really happy with what happened this weekend. He would not qualify this as a win himself. He would probably, he's going to be spending a lot of time at the factory, a lot of time in simulator, a lot of time going through the data, probably burning the midnight oil quite a bit. And I can't imagine him being content to be anywhere close to this anymore. So look to see a huge fire lit underneath him. And I think that needs to happen just in Mercedes in general, because they really haven't delivered the car that they should have delivered. And that's a little bit concerning to me. When you look at, they didn't do any upgrades, or they did one upgrade or something last year, and the whole thing was, whoa, man, the W13 is going to be a rocket ship. Oh, it's going to blow everyone away. It's going to be amazing. Oh, there's no side pods. Oh, look how, and even me, I'm sitting there going, man, this looks amazing. It's such an amazing looking car. Martin Brundle was saying, if you take it apart and you can see underneath the panels, it looks like a Swiss watch. It's just so compact and neat and looks great, but looks could be deceiving, and this is right now, you have an engine that just doesn't look competitive, and you have a car that, quite frankly, isn't built well. It just doesn't get as much as the Red Bull and the Ferrari, and that's very, very concerning, not just for the immediate next couple of races, but for the next 3 years. If they're stuck with an engine that's just not up to speed, that's going to be a big issue. Moving on to the Alpine team. I'm going to give Esteban Ocon a win. He finished 6th. He did lose a spot from his qualification, but he qualified 5th, which is pretty amazing. He scrapped with his teammate Fernando Alonso. And, I think some people might be upset with him for doing it. I'm not. I think that it was phenomenal that he was scrapping with Fernando Alonso. I think that him, just putting his elbows out there and saying, I'm going to fight, including if it's my own teammate, I'm going to fight. I'm going to show what I can do, and I'm going to show that I'm competitive. I think that's pretty good for Esteban. I think he needs to do that anyway. I think with Esteban, he knows he's the future of this team, but he also knows that Fernando Alonso pulls a lot of weight, and he is the two-time champion, and he's the venerated figure. And I think what you're seeing with Esteban is saying, no, I'm going to show you that I'm the better driver. I'm going to show you that I can compete, and I'm going to show you that I should be the future of this team, and you need to start the futures now, essentially. And that's what I loved about him today. I know some people were saying, what is he doing? Oh, he's going to end up costing the team. Well, he finished sixth, and he got him a great result out of it. I'm sure they may get mad at him later on or whatever, and may have some words for him, but I don't care. I like to see that he has fight, regardless of with his teammate or without his teammate. It's going to make him a better driver. If he's scrapping with a two-time world champion and, ended up, learning something from it, that's going to benefit him in the future. They didn't wreck, whether Alonso had some issues later, who knows what that's from. But for Esteban, I'm really happy for him. I'm going to put him in the winner category. His teammate, on the other hand, unfortunately, just because he did have mechanical issues and ended up having a dramatic failure. Actually, it was like three of them at the same time, him, Bottas, and Ricardo, but losing 9 places, ended up retiring. But for Fernando, yeah, it stinks. It's not the way you want to have this race, because he was running a great race too. He was scrapping with his teammate. He was up there in the points, looking really good. I think the Alpine, when it's on its target and it's at its best, they look really competitive, and that's very, very good. And it's good for the season, because it shows that they're going to be a solid midfield team. They're going to definitely be able to strike at Mercedes. There's no doubt about this. At some point, they're going to be scrapping with the Mercedes, especially if Mercedes upgrades don't go as well as they think they're going to go. So that's definitely a good sign for them. But also, when you just look at between safety cars, bad weather, and just bad pit stops and everything, they're going to be challenging for podiums, both of them. And I think that's a really good sign. So it's a win for Alpine, a win for Esteban Ocon. For Fernando, unfortunately, just because of what happened, we can't give him a win for that one today. Moving on, McLaren. Now, normally last year I would have been like, yeah, it's about time we talk about McLaren. The way this testing and the first race went, I didn't expect to talk about McLaren so early, but they did get points. I know that's going to be weird for you McLaren fans. I'm sounding like I'm condescending to you, but they got points. Lando Norris finishing 7th. This car is not a great car, but he was able to push it up 4 spots. He drove a really good race. I don't think that he did anything wrong. I think that, considering where they started, him and Danny Ricciardo, I think that they drove really, really well. And he was able to push the car up. I think for McLaren, I'm going to give them, unfortunately, I'm going to give them a loss because of what happened later with Daniel Rick. But for Lando, I got to give him a win for that one. You definitely have to feel happy for him. You definitely have to feel that, this is not the ideal start they have for themselves, especially considering last year they were talking about how Ferrari was their competition, and it's clearly not competition anymore. But Lando was able to do more with less, and that's really good for him. McLaren, on the other hand, I still, like, you look at Danny Rick, he was up there as well. He was fighting. He was trying to get up there, and then he completely fell apart. Engine issues, ended up having to stop. Was wheeled, kind of weird. I don't think I've seen, where they were wheeling a car or pushing a car during a virtual safety car back into pit lane. That was really weird to see. At times he was ahead of Lando, and it looked like he was doing good, but unfortunately just because of things falling apart, and that's a mechanical thing. So for McLaren, I got to put them in the loser category, except for Lando. I think that he did a really good job considering with what he had. Moving on to Alfa Tauri, again, we had a little bit of a bipolar thing going on here. Pierre got himself up to 8th. It looks like he was in a little bit of trouble, a little bit of pain and everything. But after last week with that catastrophic fire that happened in his car and engine issues and, again, Red Bull powered engine, to come back and move up 1 spot, finish 8th. So definitely a win for him. But Alfa Tauri is still having mechanical issues, and that affected Yuki Tsunoda. His teammate, who's, I just feel bad for Yuki at this point. He had issues in qualifying, and then couldn't even get off the grid today. Just didn't even start. He was scratched before the race. He's got to be really gutted about that, and that's got to be really, really hard for him, especially considering, he's shown dramatic improvement, and this was definitely a good track for him, a very fast track for a driver that's a pretty aggressive driver. So definitely a loss for him, but really more a loss for Alpha Tauri with their mechanics. Reliability issues the last 2 weeks. They definitely got to get their act together and produce a better car. Moving on to producing a better car, Haas. This is going to be a tough one. Kevin Magnussen is in the category. Haas is in the winning category. Mick Schumacher, I'm not going to touch and assign him because it would be bad form for it. But for those of you who watched qualifying, Mick Schumacher was racing really well. He was qualifying really well. And then he took a really, really, really bad hit. And this speaks to Saudi Arabia. Is it a safe track? Is it not a safe track? And we'll get into that later on. But he did hit the curb. The car spun out. Initially, they said it was a 70G hit. I think they downgraded that to a 30G hit. Like, that's a big downgrade. That's still terrible for anyone, 30 Gs. But the crash itself was pretty unnerving to see. For me, I remember my first full year watching Formula One. I remember when Jules Bianchi got into the crash in Japan, and how they just weren't showing anything and weren't talking about it and just kind of keeping away from it. Now, granted, the production is different now than it is then, but they were just not talking. And I kept thinking to myself, like, what's going on? Why is this taking so long? Why are they not mentioning what's going on? And I went on Twitter, and someone had posted that video, that horrible video of Jules' crash. And so that's what this reminded me of. So Mick seems to be doing okay. He's doing fine. That being said, for situations like this, I'm not going to sit there and put him in any good or bad category. I'm just glad that he's okay. But for the Haas team, with one car, because Mick wasn't able to drive, that car was pretty smashed pretty badly, and he needs to get his rest and recuperate. The Haas team still did really well. Kevin Magnussen 9th, and even Kevin Magnussen and Nico Hulkenberg, both these drivers coming off huge layoffs in Formula 1. People don't realize the amount of physical stress it takes to drive this car. Kevin was complaining about his neck yesterday during qualifying on why he didn't even qualify better. I think that the long qualifying session really put a strain on his neck and the practices and everything, and not being used to it. So for him to come back and really just physically be able to deal with the stress of the car and put his car into the points, put his car ahead of Lewis Hamilton. And he did have a couple of good battles with Lewis Hamilton. Imagine, again, last year saying Kevin Magnussen is going to be driving the Haas and battling Lewis Hamilton, and Lewis is going to have to fight for it. Again, I would have bet $1 million that wouldn't have happened. And good thing I don't have $1 million, because I definitely would have bet that $1 million and lost it all. But yeah, no, it's pretty cool to see K-Mag back, and the Danish driver is in a competitive car. Haas is in a competitive car. Sure, they got more out of this weekend, yes. But I do think with a driver that's not really well conditioned, I think that they have to be feeling really good. Of course, they're going to want more. Gunther's going to want more. Gene Haas is going to want more, but we'll see what happens. I think the good news with this layoff that Kevin is going to get into more of a conditioning mode. See the masseuse, see the physios, get some neck exercises in, get his conditioning back up to speed. And I think once he's truly comfortable in the car, I think you're going to see really good things out of him. And when Mick is back, I think you're going to see that as well. I think he's going to develop and see how well he does. Moving on to the Alfa Romeos. So Guan Yu Zhou, I'm putting him in the winner category. He had a terrible start. He had made a terrible mistake, which essentially got him a penalty. And then when he took the penalty the wrong way, which I don't know if that's a team issue where they made him do the 5-second penalty while it was under safety car, which you're not allowed to do. I had a brain fart on that as well, because I'm like, what's the big deal? But he had to actually go back and do that penalty all over again. Despite all that, despite the terrible start, despite the penalty and adopting the penalty at the wrong time and then having to do it again, he finished 11th right out of the points. He moved up one spot. So this kind of speaks volumes for him as a driver. He's a quality driver, and he's a rookie driver. So you're seeing rookie mistakes. You're seeing, him not, his starts have been terrible. Both his starts have been terrible, but you've seen him recover so well and get a lot out of that Alfa Romeo and be able to move back up. And I think that speaks volumes for him as a driver. I'm going to give him a win in this category, and I'm giving Alfa Romeo a win because they've definitely put together a really, really great car. For Valtteri Bottas, he dropped 7 spots. He had engine issues. This is something we talked about during testing where the car's fast, but they did have issues, and they didn't manifest itself until today. I'm struggling to sit there and put Bottas in the winning category, even though he really didn't do anything wrong. But when you have stuff like this happen to you, whether it's Sergio having bad luck or Lewis having a bad car setup or whatever, it's just one of those things where it wasn't work out. It doesn't work out. So for Valtteri, I have no doubt that he'll be back. The things that I like about Valtteri, his qualifying is so good. He is up there. It puts his team in a really, really good spot. But more important than that is last year I criticized him quite a bit for not being able to overtake. And that was more of a Mercedes thing than anything else. Lewis was able to figure out how to overcome that. Valtteri wasn't. But now Valtteri's in a car where he's able to drive it more I just butchered that. More comfortable for him. He was able to, do a really good job getting comfortable. So once the car gets up to speed, I'm sure he's going to do phenomenal. He's going to have multiple points finishes. He's going to be scrapping with Lewis and George and Esteban and Fernando. So you're going to see and Pierre as well. So you're going to see some really good battles. But because of the engine reliability, unfortunately, you got to fall off for that one. Moving on to the Aston Martin team. Oh, man, I don't even know where to begin with this one. This team should not be anywhere as bad as it is. Nico Hülkenberg ended up moving up 5 spots into 12th, qualified bad. Again, this is pretty impressive considering he's a super sub. He's not conditioning like the other athletes to be able to move up the way he did. But at the same time, just as a team in general, it's definitely been it's been piss poor. I don't know where they got this wrong. I don't know if they just have the wrong personnel building the car, around the car. Honestly, I'm going to spend a little bit of time looking into that because it should not be this bad. McLaren should not be this bad either. But when you see Lando be able to push that car up, yeah. Now, granted, Nico's a substitute driver, but the one that I'm really concerned about is Lance. Lance is qualified behind Nico, and today he finished behind him, 1 lap down. And this is kind of weird for Lance because he's definitely shown improvement year over year, and this year that improvement isn't there. And I'm not sure if it's just because the car isn't there, or he's regressing as a driver, or things just aren't comfortable for him. But overall, it's been a bad couple weeks for Aston Martin. I'm sure Lawrence Stroll isn't happy. We've been hearing rumors to the point where he's been pretty heavy-handed with the team as far as demanding more out of them. I don't know if that's the right approach, but we'll see what happens. Expect big changes before Australia. But the good news is Sebastian Vettel should be back. He's still been dealing with COVID. So super sub Nico should be back at home resting, I guess. And Sebastian should be back. And I think that's when you'll see a true picture. You're going to have a 4-time world champion with a wealth of experience. So you'll be able to see just how good the performance of the car is or isn't. And now moving on to the last team, the Williams. Man, where do I begin with this one? So it's definitely a loss all around. There's no doubt about it. Alex Albon finishing 14th, moved up 2 places, but let's be honest, a lot of that had to do with retirements more than anything. Had a scrap with Lance Stroll. That was, kind of boneheaded on his end. Now, granted, he is on a worse team than he was with the Red Bull and Alpha Tauri. But that being said, you do expect to have a little bit better racecraft out of him. And again, it could just be something simple as the car is not as drivable. But yeah, he's definitely not doing as great, and we're definitely going to put him in the loser category. Lastly, Nicholas Latifi. I mentioned today that maybe the Williams pulled Nicholas and told him we need to see something this year or else. And I think that maybe the pressures got to him a little bit because we're seeing the or else. It just crashes in qualifying, crashes on the track. He's not doing anyone any favors because those safety cars have definitely affected how things play out at the top of the board. Checo Perez, for example, is probably sitting there going, what the heck, Nicholas? So yeah, for Nicholas Latifi, they really need to sit down and have a talk with him. Whether it's like, hey, like it doesn't matter, like you need to just find a way to produce. because he's not producing. He's a back marker. He's losing control of the car. His concentration is just not there, and when you look at these driver errors, I'm glad he's okay, but 2 crashes in a weekend, that's just not good juju at all, and that's got to be pretty tough to deal with. So we'll see what happens there. So moving on to next week, they are going to be in Australia. We are going to do an Australian preview, so we have a lot to talk about today, so I'm not going to sit there and touch Australia. I think that'll be a smaller episode in and of itself in between then and the Australian Grand Prix. I think that'll be pretty good to do, but we are going to kind of touch on a few other things, though. We're going to talk about why we race in Saudi Arabia, how that compares to other countries, and is it worth it? So for those of you, I'm sure some of you may have sort of paid attention or not. In the prelude to Saudi Arabian race, there was a missile strike close to the track by the Houthi rebels in Yemen. For those of you who are not up to speed on this, the country of Yemen, which is south of Saudi Arabia, is embroiled in a civil war. The Houthis, which are a tribal group in Yemen, are financed by Iran. They are fighting a civil war with the other Yemenis who live there, who are financed by Saudi Arabia. It's essentially a proxy war. Both Iran and Saudi Arabia are funding these two different groups to fight a war on their behalf, which has happened plenty of times in human history. It just happens to be happening right there, right now. To escalate the war, Saudi Arabia, though, has been launching strikes against the Houthi rebels. And when I say the rebels, that includes women and children. There is a humanitarian disaster there. Children are starving. Men and women are starving. There's disease. And this war has just dragged on for a while now. It's been, 6 years, 7 years? I think it's been going on for quite some time. A lot of people have lost their lives. We don't even know the exact numbers just because, it's hard to ascertain at this point, but it is a terrible crisis. So leading up to that, the Houthi rebels do have weapons supplied by Iran, and they were able to launch an attack leading up to the race. Now, this is an interesting thing because, we heard about this. Those of us who pay attention to the news heard about this, and we sat there and said, is this safe? Was it a fluke? What's going to happen? And then on Friday, when we're sitting here watching FP1 and FP2, you see reports that the Aramco facility, about 10 kilometers away from the Jeddah track, got hit by a missile strike or drone strike while cars were on the track. And you could see the smoke, and it was a pretty big fire. And you saw a situation which was interesting because you would think that at some point they would cancel the race and say, okay, that's it. We're not going to race. But instead, they said everything is fine. And then you saw definitely a stupendous moment where you saw the drivers have a meeting. It was a 4-hour meeting where they talked about whether they should be racing there or should not be racing there. You saw team principals come in. You saw officials come in. You saw a lot of strange comments, whether it was, well, yeah, that's an infrastructure target, not a human target, which that's so stupid to say. I can't believe I'm repeating that, but that's what they said. They were talking about how the missile defenses around the track were much better and high tech, and that just that opens up a whole nother can of worms. The fact of the matter is that the missile defenses they had, the drone defenses they had, did not work. They did not work because if they had worked, that never would have happened during the free practice. It wouldn't happen the week before, period. So it didn't work. And the fact of the matter is they knew that it wasn't going to work. They knew that it failed, and they said, well, we're still going to have it anyway. There's rumors that the drivers were strong-armed into saying, this will be difficult for you if you decide not to race. I don't know if that's true or not. I've heard the stories. We'll see if it's actually been confirmed in the next week or two. If that's the case, that's just a terrible example to be set. That should never, ever, ever happen in any way, shape, or form. If the drivers were coerced into staying under threat of, having trouble leaving the country or something else, that does not bode well for the sport whatsoever. For the team principals, for them to sit there and say, okay, well, we'll just go along with this. Everything feels safe. Toto Wolff had a ridiculous comment about how it's part of the culture. Christian Horner saying, oh, the terrorists will win. Look, I hate to tell you this, but the fact of the matter is, number one, it's a civil war. Number two, it's definitely, something where you can't sit there and say, we're going to pound our chest and say the terrorists are going to win if we cancel the race. I think that's very disingenuous to say, because the fact of the matter is, this isn't for example, a terrorist attack happening and you've made efforts to make sure it doesn't happen again. no efforts were made to ensure it wouldn't happen again. At this point, you would just assume that the Houthis were just trying to make a point and trying to embarrass the Saudis, and they did that. So that's what you really have to talk about is, the Houthis, they first launched that attack a few days ago before the race to say, hey, we're probing the defenses. We want to see what happens here. Oh, this will work. Okay, now let's just embarrass them and make a statement. And they made the statement. Who did it attack? Aramco. And that brings you to another part of this. Aramco is an oil company. It's actually owned by the government of Saudi Arabia. It's a national oil company. They're also a title sponsor for Formula One. How much do they pay for that sponsorship? $450 million. That is a insane amount of money. Almost $500 million to be a title sponsor. So that leads into conflict. The Aramco facility was hit. It's a title sponsor. That's a message. And you have to sit there and say to yourself, granted, we're not going to sit there and get rid of the sponsorship. But it also leads to the question of why are we continuing this? Is it really about doing the right thing or not caving to terror? Or is it because the Saudi government says we cannot lose face? We can't lose face. And there's been a lot of valid criticisms about the Saudi government, not just with this race, just in general. But that's something we need to talk about because the fact of the matter is Formula One is expanding. Formula One needs money to expand. Money does come from sponsorships, and there's a lot of money coming out of these Gulf states. There's a lot of money that was coming out of Russia. We saw with Earl Cali. There's money coming out of the United States, which is why we're moving to the United States as well. Cash is king, as we've all said it. It's become a cliche. Lewis and Sebastian first used to say it to talk about inequities with paid drivers and drivers not getting their seats and everything. And now we're seeing it more and more so from the standpoint of, sponsorships and where we race and everything. So we do have to have that conversation. We talk about We Race as One, which was that catch line that they used to get in with the with the civil rights movement that goes on around in the United States and other parts of the world. But then you sit there and you say, but like you look in Saudi Arabia where this poor kid, 17-year-old kid who is sentenced to death for shoplifting and it doesn't even look like he was there at the scene of the crime. And now he's, going to be put to death and he's writing a letter to Lewis Hamilton asking for him to help. And it's heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking to hear about, and you hear about 80-something people that were killed in one day, But then at the same time, as an American, I have to sit there and say, like, we kill people here. We execute people in the United States of America too. It's definitely confusing. And I wish I could sit there and tell you that there is a definitive right or wrong. But we don't live in a world that's black and white. We don't live in a world that's absolute right and wrong. We live in a world where there's shades of gray and nuances that, quite frankly, sometimes irritate the hell out of us. And as a Formula One fan, I'm speaking from the heart here. It is hard sometimes when you sit there and say, what partnerships are we doing? Why are we going to these certain places? Why do we sort of whitewash this? Part of me says that when you bring these events, you bring modernity to them. You bring, a change. You bring a cultural change. And when I say cultural change, I need to stress this. This isn't a European cultural change that I'm talking about. Because many of us who aren't European, myself included, do sit there and speak out against human rights abuses regardless of the country. I speak out about human rights abuses here in the United States all the time. Anyone who knows me knows I talk about that type of stuff quite a bit. If you follow me on Twitter, you'll notice that I do that a little bit sometimes. But it is important to talk about. It is important to sit there and say, we want to bring that idea of, human rights solutions and racial solutions and misogyny solutions and sexual identity solutions. We want to bring those to light, and you want to bring that to you. So when you see someone like Lewis Hamilton or Sebastian Vettel speaking up, that's a great thing. And would that make more of an impact? So from that standpoint, you're like, yes, you need to go to these places because you're going to bring that modernity. You're going to bring those different types of viewpoints, and you're going to be able to showcase it. But on the flip side of it, you have to sit there and say, but is it actually going to make a difference? Is Saudi Arabia actually going to stop bombing Houthi rebels, the women and children? Are they going to sit there and not have the human rights abuses in their country and the lack of freedom that a lot of people in that country have, including a lot of religious people in that country? You look at Qatar, which relies heavily on foreign labor, and how that foreign labor, quite frankly, is, it's a tantamount to slavery. And you have to look at places like the United States. The United States, we have our problems too. It may be as severe as other places, maybe not, but our foreign policy isn't exactly, we're not exactly the house on the hill like we used, like to think we are, and we definitely have our problems here with how we treat, black people and some minority groups and how we treat women, so it's definitely confusing, but I think that we need to have those talks and we just need to keep pushing forward. I think that there's people who didn't want to watch Saudi Arabia and they were right not to watch Saudi Arabia. This isn't you missed out on a great race. I support you if you didn't want to watch it because you're sticking to your guns and that's important. And, you speaking out against that will show F1 and everything. But I also think you need to speak up as well. Like for me, I can enjoy the race, but I'm also going to speak my mind and say you really need to pay attention to these sponsorships. You need to pay attention to who we're partnering with, what type of people are buying into teams like Cali and Russian oligarchs, and how we expand into Formula One, how we expand. And that's going to be the last thing I touch on here because, we talk about moving to Saudi Arabia and whether we should be there or not. We talk about moving to Qatar, whether we should be there or not. But the United States, we're moving into the United States as well. Formula One is aggressively expanding. It's just been announced that they're going to have a race in 2023. It's going to be on the Las Vegas Strip. It's going to be a third American race. And I've obviously on Twitter seen mixed things about this. Me, for one, I am over the moon happy because Las Vegas is like a 5-hour drive from here. And I have plenty of friends in Las Vegas, so I have a place to stay. And that would just be completely awesome. But I also sit there and say, there's people who want to see a race in South Africa. Not Africa. Africa is a continent, just so you know. And Africa is a pretty big continent for those of you who are sitting there saying, what about Africa? Africa is a continent. South Africa would be the country where we would have the race. And I think it would be phenomenal. I really don't want to hear this about the lack of infrastructure or this or that. We had a race in Saudi Arabia. We've had races in Qatar, races in Bahrain, where you're sitting there wondering, where's the money coming from? What circumstances are they building the track? I'm sure we can make it work in South Africa, and I would be very, very happy to see it in South Africa. I do think that a South African race is going to come pretty soon. You've seen rumors that they want to have 30 races, yes or no, throughout the year. Yes or no is like, do we want that? Do we not want that? So I'm just going to tell you what I think. I don't think they're ever going to have 30 races, but they're throwing the 30 races out there because they know that they're going to expand how many races there's going to be. And that's because cash is king. They know that they have a moneymaker here in the United States finally. After years and years of trying to break into the United States market, they've broken into the United States market. There's so many F1 fans here now, which is great for me because I get to talk to many people about Formula One and get to hang out with Formula One people, and I think that's pretty awesome. But it is going to change the future of the sport. America is a big market. Now, I need to stress, I'm not going to pound my chest and be like USA number one, I love America, all this other stuff. No, the United States is a big market. It's a huge country. It's 370 million people. It's a very diverse country. It's a very spread out area-wise, a huge country. There's a big difference between Texas, Miami, Florida, and Las Vegas. And I think they're going to have a fourth race, and it's going to be in New York City. I'm calling it now. You heard it here first. They're going to have a New York race. It's going to be announced at some point in the next couple of years. Then come back and be like, Jojo, you were right. They are going to expand the United States of America because there's money to be made in the United States of America. That's why the United States is being pushed ahead of South Africa. That's why the United States is going to get pushed ahead of European races. And I know a lot of the European fans don't want to hear that because you do have wonderful tracks like Spa, like Hockenheim, Monza, Silverstone, these great traditional tracks where you've seen some really great racing. And you have tracks like Turkey. Turkey's phenomenal. I love that track in Istanbul Park. I think that's great. I love the Hungaro Ring. I think that's a great track. I love Spielberg. I mean, just there's so many great tracks, but at some point, you're going to see that balance between how do we expand into America, how do we make money, and do we have to take tracks away? And I think that you're going to see all three. You're going to see an expansion into America, and you're going to see an American leg of the tour. I don't think they're going to get rid of Austin. I don't think that they're going to get rid of Miami just to have Las Vegas. I think they're going to try to get as many as they can and make it sensible. So that Las Vegas stretch is going to be in November. So Austin is typically in October. So you're going to see Austin, Las Vegas, Mexico City, or Austin, Mexico City to Las Vegas. but those are going to happen. And you're going to see Miami, whether it's at the beginning on its way to Montreal or not, you're going to see those legs happen. Is New York going to happen? I'm calling it. I think New York is going to happen too, to be completely frank. But you're also going to see them try to expand into South Africa if it's financially viable. And I hate to say that, but this is how they're going to be. How can we make money off of this? How can we get the track fees and the licensing and make sure we get the ticketing and get people to travel there and get all the kickbacks we need in order to make sure that works? And if they're able to do that, then it's going to happen. Now, the question is it going to be great racing? I don't know. If you look at that Las Vegas track, the mock-up they have for that track, it's essentially 4 straights and 4 right-hand turns. It's really doesn't look that impressive of a track, to be completely honest with you, except for the fact that it's going down the Las Vegas Strip, which will be a pretty phenomenal photo opportunity. It's going to be really great. But is it going to be great racing? Who knows? I mean, and that's the thing, when you look at Saudi Arabia going back there, this track is a dangerous track. And I'm glad that today didn't go off as bad as it did. But when you see inexperienced drivers, like Formula 2 drivers, had quite a few offs. When you see Mick Schumacher have that terrible wreck, and you're sitting there with your, lump in your neck, and you're sitting there wondering, is it worth it? Is this track really worth it? Is it really going to be worth going to the United States and going full handle down the Las Vegas Strip because it's going to make you money? But is it going to be good racing? Is it going to be safe racing? Is it really worth it to make these $1 billion, $500 million deals with oil companies? And when things go bad, you're stuck, in a situation that's potentially dangerous to drivers. Is it really worth it, to, take away traditional tracks to chase after, money tracks around the world in the United States of America? Or is it worth it to chase after breaking into the American market and not moving into a more world view of racing in South Africa? These are very valid questions. I think that we need to answer them. I would love to get your input on this. I could kind of go on and on and on, but I think now's a good time to wrap everything up. So yeah, definitely please subscribe. Thank you to all the new subscribers. Like I said, we're growing more and more. This past month we had over 350 downloads, which is insane to me. So thank you all. Thank you all for listening in. Please tell your friends. They can listen to Apple. They can listen on Spotify. They can listen through the website www.califormula1.com or the new YouTube channel. Make sure you subscribe. I gotta use those, be like subscribe, like, and comment, all that other stuff. But definitely go to the www.califormula1.com site. Go to contact me. I would love to hear your thoughts, or hit me up. My Twitter feed and Instagram feed is in the podcast description. Let me know your thoughts on everything, and I'll be sure to share them in the next episode if we get any in. But I would definitely love to hear your thoughts on everything. But like I said, we had a great racing weekend as far as on the track. It's exactly what we wanted to see today, and that's pretty awesome. I'm hoping that as we move into Australia, we see more of that, but we also get more clairvoyance as far as the conscience of the sport, the soul of the sport, that we get to that place where we really like it, where we can enjoy racing, but we could do it with a clear mind. On that note, I'll talk to you with the lead up to Australia. Thank you. Have a great day, and thank you for listening in. Bye.